And you're joining us for yet another market recap. I am joined today by my special co-host, Jordan Youl with StoneCastle Investment Management. Thank you for joining me, Jordan.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so listen, normally you join me on quadruple witching days, but today is a special edition where you're joining me, and it's Friday the 13th. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about equity markets and yet another all-time high. I feel like we have this discussion all the time, and yet we keep reaching new all-time highs. Cannabis sector earnings, we're going to talk about what's happening there. It's looking pretty good. NFTs, we're going to touch on NFTs again. There's a bunch of stuff going on, a bunch of money going into it. And we're going to talk about Bill C-218, which is the bill that was passed in Canada for single game betting. So we're going to jump into that. Okay, so let's start off with Friday the 13th. How do the markets feel about Friday the 13th?
Well, historically, if you go back, into 1928, the S&P 500 actually does pretty well, despite, it being Friday the 13th. August in particular, from a historical standpoint, generates a positive return about 75% of the time. And the average return is about 50 basis points. So, despite being August the 13th, typically August isn't so scary for the equity markets. And we're starting to see that today. The market's been more or less flat, but nonetheless, we'll see if we get some follow through going into the close today.
Well, that seems like a good thing for Friday the 13th. Normally it's not such a good thing, but that seems good to me.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at, what days of the week generate the strongest returns historically, it's Wednesdays and Fridays, right? Mondays are historically the worst. So yeah, what we're seeing in the markets, it really is constructive and positive. So I think it's ignoring the fact that it is August the 13th, but it's an interesting statistic nonetheless.
It is an interesting statistic. So if you're not here on quadruple witching day, you're going to be here on a Friday the 13th. Okay, equity markets. I feel like with Bruce, we talk about all-time highs. Like it feels like on a monthly basis. The markets really have had an insane year. What's happening right now with all-time highs?
Yeah, you're right. It seems quite repetitive week after week. The markets continue to inch higher and higher. The Dow Jones, the S&P, the NASDAQ, even the TSX here domestically here continue to hit all-time highs. But what's really constructive and interesting is that we're starting to see a rotation in leadership from the large caps to the small to mid caps. So, the last couple of weeks, we've been doing calls with investors, really telegraphing some of the things that we're watching very closely that could really drive the markets much higher moving forward. So we're starting to see similar characteristics as to what we experienced in the summer last year in 2020. But if you go back to the March high of this year with the small to mid caps, ever since then, they've really underperformed and lagged the larger caps. Since then, they've been more or less range bound. And case in point, if you look at IWM, which tracks the Russell 2000 index, it's been range bound in about a 25-point spread since February. But it is on the cusp of improving and breaking out. So in the relative rotation graph, we have a technical tool or a chart to show the underlying strength or reacceleration in the S&P completion index. So this is a technical tool that we use at StoneCastle. There's 4 quadrants: improving, leading, weakening, and lagging. And the constituent within this graph is of the S&P completion index. And it tracks over 3,000 securities in the US in the micro cap, small cap, and mid cap areas of the market. And you can see that the tail is on the cusp of breaking through and rotating back into the leading quadrant. So this is very constructive and positive for the equity markets in general, but also just from a sentiment perspective, we're leaning more towards a risk on market environment. And that's what we want. We want the small to mid caps to participate as we're hitting all-time highs.
Okay, what does risk on mean?
Well, it depends, right? Like there's a lot of different factors that drive the market. So as an example, in Q4 of 2019, the markets did really well, but the risk environment was more neutral. So what I mean by that is the small to mid caps really lagged and underperformed in 2019. Despite the markets doing well, it was predominantly large cap driven with leadership in the defensive sector. So, investors wanted exposure to equities, but they really had one toe in the water. It was a little bit of a barbell approach. And, case in point, the contrast between then and last year was quite significant, where, it was the small to mid caps really driving the market off the March low of last year. And that carried through to the end of, 2020 and into Q1 of this year. So the dynamics of the markets have really been quite different over the last couple of years. But what's really going to move the needle is going to be, a breakout in the small to mid caps as they participate. So as we start to see more issuers participating and hitting all-time highs in conjunction with the markets, that's very positive for equities overall. So we're definitely starting to tilt towards a risk-on market environment. And that's very healthy and constructive.
Do you think that the small to mid caps are benefiting from the fact that there's just been incredible retail participation in the markets? Like, do you feel like there's been a surge in retail participation, don't you think?
There has been, yeah, especially, with the Robinhood traders and it IPO recently. There's, accessibility of the markets is a lot easier with technology these days. But yeah, what we're going to need to see though is the institutional money, the large pools of capital start to deploy capital and accumulate stocks in that small to mid cap space. And we really haven't been seeing that over the last 4 or 5 months. So we really need the pros, like the endowment funds, the pension funds, the hedge funds, really start to accumulate and buy stock in the small to mid cap space for the for the sector or the index to break out and hit all-time highs.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about the cannabis sector. This is something actually Bruce and I have not talked about in a few weeks, which is normally a regular topic for us here. So what's going on in the cannabis sector? There were some earnings that are of note.
Yes, absolutely. In the cannabis sector, in particular, the MSOs reported this week, and the numbers were fantastic. And not just in cannabis, but the S&P earnings in general have had the strongest quarter since 2009. So it's been a really long time. This has been a fantastic quarter for issuers. But going back to the cannabis sector in particular, whether it's Curaleaf or the other issuers or whatever on the MSO side, they're starting to improve. So valuations are a lot more attractive and constructive these days compared to 4 or 5 months ago. So valuations are extremely cheap and attractive. And then we're starting to see some subtle signs of improvement from the technical side. So in that relative rotation graph, those are 4 MSOs that we've highlighted that are starting to trend in a positive direction. So Green Thumb recently rotated into the improving quadrant, Curaleaf, TrueLeaf, and a few others are starting to improve in our technical ranking models. So it's something that we definitely have our eye on at the portfolio level. With the cannabis fund that we manage on behalf of Spartan Funds, we are overweight U.S. MSOs at the portfolio level. So we're really excited about the prospects of these companies moving forward, and overall, yeah, it's very constructive and positive. So for investors that have maybe missed out on the opportunity in the cannabis sector over the last couple of years, now could be a good timely opportunity to revisit or re-enter the cannabis sector.
So just to be clear, these are obviously earnings. These are not the stock price. How has the stock price been reflective of these earnings coming out?
No, they haven't. No, not really. They continue to consolidate, and I think that's a function of the market environment right now. The healthcare and cannabis sector in general, they haven't really performed well. Year to date, they had a really strong price performance or appreciation in Q1 as we were in that risk-on market environment. But that really hasn't been the case. So on the dailies and on the short-term technical indicators that we follow, we're starting to see some subtle signs of improvement, but the market has yet to recognize these companies.
Well, and also let's not forget the fact that, this is a very unique opportunity that hasn't really happened before, where Canadian investors specifically get the opportunity to invest in U.S. cannabis companies that U.S. investors don't really have the opportunity to do. This is pretty unique opportunity, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, at some point, the tides will turn, and it might get federally legalized, or something will happen that will allow U.S. investors to pile in. And let's not forget how much capital is in the U.S. I think California, has more capital ability than I think all of Canada, and that's just one state. So it really is a very unique opportunity, and I don't think that's ever quite happened before.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And, last time I was on the show a couple months ago, we talked about this, right? And, the sector in particular goes through significant uptrends and downtrends. And we're just starting to base out of a significant drawdown off the February and March peaks within the sector. So, some of them are hitting, 52-week lows and whatnot, but the valuations and the fundamentals are very attractive right now. We just need the technical profile and the demand to be there from an investor perspective to drive the share prices higher.
Fundamentals are key, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you had we were going to chat a little bit about Verano. So what's happening with Verano right now?
Yeah, on a stock level, it's hitting all-time lows, unfortunately. But they did report, and their numbers are fantastic. Fundamentally, they have a lot of cash on hand. Their store to sales quarter over quarter have increased by 13%. They're flushed with cash of 150 million in treasury, so they're very well positioned and balanced from in an acquisition perspective, but from an organic growth perspective. But investors have been hesitant because of the escrow shares that have been released. So there was a lot of shares that went to market, and there was a recent block trade on the stock at $15.40. There was a lot of volume. 7.2 million shares were traded. So that is telegraphed to the market, and that's what investors have been anticipating. These are scheduled liquidity events for the company. We have more in the fall of this year and in the spring of 2022. So that's what has really put pressure on the underlying stock. As a result, the short interest has peaked up a little bit as well, or perked up a little bit as well. So we need to see that kind of resettle. But the positive sign is that when these escrow shares are released, it's going to create more normal trading volume for the security moving forward. So between now and the spring, there might be some choppiness, but after that, we could see some normal trading volume day to day with the underlying stock. But regardless, we like the company, we own it, it's growing, it's very well positioned moving forward. It has a significant footprint in many of the key states in the U.S. and 14 states it's operating. So we really like the company. But we just have to wait and see, how things unfold between now and the spring.
So I love Verano as well. They're a great company. So just to clarify, because I think this is important for people to understand. So when we say that, there's a block of trades that are coming to market, really what that means is that for various reasons, companies will have escrow on shares, meaning they have the shares, but they're not allowed to trade them in the public markets until a certain date. And it's usually a schedule. So you get like 20% every 6 months or something. And now it doesn't mean that it's being traded into the market. It just means that the holder, so usually it's a founder or an insider or a control position, and a control position is somebody that owns more than 20%. They just have the ability to trade it. So the market's reacting to the fact that this stock has become able to trade in the market. Now, the other thing that people should understand is that if you are an insider or a control position, that you have to file publicly if you're trading, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So the market's kind of reacting to something that hasn't necessarily happened. And if it does happen, we have the ability as the public to see if that's happening, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and like I said, the market has been anticipating this event, right? Yeah. And there's going to be others coming to fruition. But like I said, it is healthy for the company in the long term, when trading volume normalizes.
Yeah, and liquidity is always helpful as well, right? And shareholders and the company itself know that these events are going to happen. It's obviously scheduled way before they go public. So it's not a surprise by any means. But yeah, Verano is a great company. Love watching them do what they're doing. So congrats to Verano. Okay, we're going to talk about NFTs again. I talked about this with Bruce. I feel like such an old person when I talk about NFTs. I feel like that old grouchy lady going, I don't understand kids these days. Okay, NFTs are non-fungible tokens, which means that they are typically artwork, Imagine a baseball card that you can trade, but it's electronic. It cannot be replicated. It is unique in its blockchain build, but we keep seeing investment into it, and so there's a lot of money going into artwork, there's a lot of money going into social media, there's a lot of money going into film. We have one of our companies that has just actually created a full feature length film, Currency Works, so we keep seeing this money pour into it. Now, on the note that you sent me, I was absolutely blown away by this. So tell us, how much has been invested into NFTs to date?
Yeah, $2.5 billion in sales, ending at the end of the second quarter of this year. So for the first half this year, 2.5 billion in sales. And just as a comparison, the first half of last year, it was only 13.7 million.
Okay, so just to clarify, I said to date, but you're talking the first 6 months of 2021. 2.5 billion has been invested compared to the first 6 months of 2020, 13.7 million. That is incredible.
Yeah, it's astronomical. And when I was on the show in March, you and I were talking about Lindsay Lohan and Elon Musk, posting his tweet and offering it for sale, right? And I think there was $1 million of demand to buy that tweet, right? So we've seen astronomical growth, and this commodity is not going to go away anytime soon. Tom Brady, for example, released his first set of NFTs through DraftKings Marketplace this week. And Wayne Gretzky and Tony Hawk are two others that are going to be releasing their versions of their NFTs shortly through DraftKings as well. So we're starting to see a lot more athletes and celebrities starting to go to market with a lot of this memorabilia.
Well, and I guess why not, right? Bruce made a really good point, and I thought this might be where things go, is that eventually we'll hang our NFT on the wall virtually, and we'll wear our virtual reality glasses, and you can see your art on your wall that's virtual.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
It's still an odd concept to me, but it's a really big thing. And we're seeing some of our great issuers, are heavily involved in the NFT space. We're seeing so much growth in it. I mean, I'm just intrigued to see what's going to happen with it. And obviously, everything in our lives have kind of gone down that path. So it makes sense that we're going to bring artwork into it. Artwork should live everywhere in our lives, whether it's virtual or in reality. So it's just intriguing to watch. On that note, actually, Jordan, I just want to mention that the CSE, in partnership with a bunch of amazing partners, are going to be holding a digital asset in the capital markets event. It will be on September 22nd. We will be sending you more details, so make sure that you subscribe to CSE TV or check out our website for those event details. More coming to you on that. Okay, let's end off with Bill C-218. This is a bill that was passed through the Senate this summer. This allows Canadians to invest in single sport gaming events. Tell us about this.
Yeah, exactly. And, we spoke about this back in June. That week in particular is when the vote took place. It was the third reading and it went to a royal assent. And we talked about the opportunity for the gaming sector, moving forward. But yeah, news came out this week that effectively August 27th is when Canadians can go and start betting, single game bets, and they can do that through different applications, kiosks, or websites. So that takes place in a couple of weeks, and that in itself is going to create a tremendous opportunity for some of these CSE listed issuers.
Okay, so obviously this is going to make a lot of money for a lot of people. What do you see this coming to the capital markets? We have some issuers that are in the space and they're seeing some great success. Are we going to see this kind of stuff come to capital markets, or will this be more of a private play?
No, I think it'll be a little bit of both. I think, as the industry continues to grow and evolve, we're going to see a lot more niche markets start to show up, whether it's on the private side or public side, but it's going to create investment opportunities for investors. Like, look at Fans Unite as an example. When we spoke about that back in June, that day or the day before, they went to market and did a $10 million raise. So it's going to attract institutional investors as the market grows, but it's going to benefit both private and public companies. We'll see some mergers and acquisitions. and they'll create opportunities and synergies between companies, right?
Well, yeah, and I'm sure the government won't mind it too. I'm sure they've got their hand in there, don't they?
Well, they definitely do at the provincial level, right? So in BC, for example, the BC Lottery Commission will oversee, the this law in BC, and that's going to create tax revenue as well. But also as Canadians, it's going to create a marketplace that is safe and regulated, and I think
Yeah.
that's really important, right? And it's also going to potentially steal some money from the illicit market as well. So we're early stages, but we've seen this evolve over the last number of months, and yeah, it's we're excited about it. So
Yeah, and I think that's a really important part. And we talk about that when cannabis came to market is kind of this regulated environment. There is so many benefits as far as just pure safety, and having kind of that environment available to people. Okay, what are we going to think about going into next week, Jordan?
yeah, next week, Fed Chair Jay Powell is set to speak on Tuesday, and followed by that is the FOMC minutes from their talks a couple of weeks ago. That'll be released. So that'll definitely be a catalyst midweek. And what the market takes from that will really kind of dictate what the dollar does, interest rates, and obviously that'll affect commodities and equity prices. So that's something that we're definitely watching. But from a top-down macro perspective, we're watching for these breakouts in some of these technical indicators that could really benefit equity investors in the equity markets moving forward as we, begin, like the second half of the year.
Sounds great. Well, listen, always a pleasure to have you join me. I do have to ask, do you have, decent air quality where you are? I know you're in Kelowna. There's a lot of fires going on right now. We're seeing it in Vancouver today. It's super smoggy. Is everyone safe and healthy there?
Not really, to be honest. The air quality is actually quite bad. As an example, the last 2 mornings when I've been driving to the office, I've had to put my windshield wipers on because there's so much ash on my window. So the air quality is not very good, and it's a little bit challenging, especially with the family and the kids at home. It's tough, right? We want to get outside and enjoy ourselves during the summer months, but yeah, the air quality is not very good here.
Well, and it doesn't help that we have COVID on the rise as well in your area. So I'm sending all my best wishes out to you guys. There is lots of places that people can donate. So there's firefighters that are traveling from all over the place that are coming to your region, and trying to help with the fires situation. If you can donate, please donate. If you can help in any way, it's pretty tragic what's happening right now. So I wish you and your family all the best. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you again for joining me this week. You're always a pleasure to chat with, and we'll be chatting with you probably the next quadruple witching day.
I'm looking forward to it. September 17th.
Or Friday the 13th. Either one.
Whatever comes first.
Thank you again, Jordan. Have a wonderful weekend.
Same to you. Thanks for having me.